Wednesday Night Hump live stream. Thank you so much for taking the time to show up. It's always a pleasure to be here with you guys, to be able to sit here and talk for a little bit about music gear and stuff like that. It's always a thrill. Speaking of thrills, it is thrilling to me that time being the expensive thing that it's becoming more and more every day, a valuable thing, certainly, to be sure. You spend a little bit of that valuable time with me is always greatly appreciated. Let me make a couple adjustments here. Wow, that's a lot of interesting. Hey, Scott. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Hey, Scott, I listened to that track that you put up today. I like that track, actually, to be honest with you, man. It's got a vibe to it that I like. Michael Watson. Hey, how you doing, sir? Good to have you in the house. It has been a good, interesting week, guys, and full of interesting things. I always start out by talking about things that have been going around here in general at the Upstairs to the Right studio. Uh, while I wait for more people to show up in the live stream, one of the funny things that happened, well, not funny, but funny, haha, is I should have had my shipment of new guitars, but in by now. I should actually physically have them. Uh, hey, how you doing, sir? Thank you. It's a cover of Fade to Gray by the 69. Yeah, I like that one, man. That was a good one. I really, really like that. They should have been here, but for some reason, FedEx sent them not from Tokyo to actually Osaka to Amsterdam or to the Netherlands, but they sent it to Indianapolis for some reason. My guitars are sitting in a where in a at a FedEx facility somewhere in not somewhere, I know where, in Indianapolis. I have no idea. They, as of yet, have not given me a reason why. And yeah, it's a little bit of a nightmare. Uh, it really is. I have no idea why that happened. So that's fun. Been trying to sort that out. They should get it here. It's just an unnecessary delay at best. I hope that that is the best thing that occurs with that. The other thing is today, I you look like Crazy Bone. Crazy Bone. I don't know who Crazy Bone is. Isn't Crazy Bone one of those guys from Bone Thugs and Harmony? And wasn't Bone Thugs and Harmony's that group admit that their first album was an occultic album that they had, incantations on? So nah, I don't want everything to do with that. As my music history seems to, bounce in my head, that's the truth about that. So thanks anyway. Um, Good to have you here. Welcome to the chat. Um, what else? You know, I was invited by a gentleman to come over, and he wants me to produce him. He wants to put out some music, and he heard about me and asked if I would come over and listen to what he had to say, and this, that, and the other. And it's always funny, man. When you're around non-musicians, this guy is not he's got a okay range. It's just um he's a little older. He was more of a dancer than he was a singer. But I go in, he starts playing me all this stuff, and then he says, "Well, I've got a guitar." I want to hear you play the guitar. And I'm like, you know, I, you know, they don't understand that if I didn't go there to play, I'm not playing. But I was, you know, in kind of a good mood, so I said, "Yeah, all right, go get your guitar." And he brings down a nylon string guitar, and immediately my mind shot back to that guitar lesson I told you guys about that I did back when I was 12 years old, and how my dad borrowed a nylon acoustic guitar from his friend that had been sitting in the window. And when the guy at the teacher was tuning it, every string is like pop, 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 right in front of the class. So embarrassing. And it just made me smile. And of course, it was out of tune. So I tuned it up and I listened to read it and I played through it a little bit. He's like, yeah, yeah, that's great. He said to me, he says, well, I play a little bit of guitar. He said, but you don't play very much of these. I said, yeah, I've been kind of taking a break from music altogether. I haven't been playing very much at all, honestly, recently. He said, well, you just picked up that guitar right now and tuned it immediately and started playing like you were playing yesterday. I said, yeah, because I've been playing for a long time. It's just it's funny to me. It's not a matter of if I can play; it's a matter of do I want to play. That's kind of a heavy thing because, and this has nothing to do with age or I'm burnt or a little bit of burnout, I suppose, but not so much. It's just again, it's what I was talking about in that last one of my live streams about inspiration, and actually in my regular content chat, I was talking about finding a reason to push record. And today was an excellent example of a situation where he asked me to, basically, produce it. He's like, well, I could pay this. And then I was like, I'm not really interested. Money doesn't excite me in that regard because you can't pay me if I'm working on something and I'm miserable doing it. I've always been that way. But one of the things that was good is that he one of the things he played me that did catch my ear was some Afro beats music, and he played me a current Afro beats artist within the last 6 months had a hit song, and I listened to it, and I realized it was nothing but an Afro beats beat underneath what we would consider to be 90s R&B. And I was don't listen to too much stuff, new stuff, but when I heard that, I said, "Wait a minute, this is just with some R&B chords on top of it," and I found that interesting. So I might do one project with that with him, write one track and do that. But the guy wants to do a lot of stuff, and I'm just not interested. He asked me to play live with him. Well, could you come and accompany me? And I'm like, no. I'm kind of just no. he, some people can't leave the stage too. And that's another thing that I talked about. I had a live stream talking about some folks just cannot give it up and leave the stage. I got to be in front of it because I asked him today. I said, "Why do you want to do this?" I want to be in front of the people. I got energy and I want to influence. And I said, "You want to be on stage so people look at you and validate you." Is what that always comes down to. And in my book, that's not enough. It's just not enough. So really, Phineas Henshaw. Phineas, how you doing, sir? Says, "Lol, I get PSD. Just listen, you get PSD." When he brought that nylon guitar down, I was like, "Here we go." I thought in my mind, "Oh, here we go." But it actually wasn't in that bad of a shape. And once it got tuned up, at least the strings were new. And again, it's just, and I'm going to work with him because I want to help people out, and I am going to work because it is he did find, but he had to pitch me today on find give me something here that you want to do that's of interest to me, and it was interesting enough. But it was the Afro beats thing, and producing a track like that. That is would be different for me. So, because I like producing all kinds of music, so that would be interesting. So there's that, guys. But I get PSD just listening to this. The guitars are mostly bad in those situations. It's not only that, but when I've got a guitar and he's playing me a track that the guy is playing an acoustic guitar on, and he brings me down a nylon string guitar, and I start thinking to myself, okay, a guitar is not a guitar is a guitar. It- you know, and so I, in these in the temp anyway, it's just yeah, it's just PSD. It's just unless they're rich and the card came out of a glass case, even if it came out of a glass case, if it's the wrong friggin' instrument for the situation, you know. Has anyone seen these new Jackson Surfcasters? Are they the new thing? No, I haven't seen those. I'm gonna check that out. Run Riot in the house. How you doing? Welcome, sir. Good to have you here. Can I see your chat? Yeah, I can see your chat, sir. Welcome. It's just one of those things. And I just find it amazing. I may, of course, I may do. And actually, for Afrobeats music, a nylon acoustic might actually be a better thing than anything else. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm running it through the computer here. I'm running it through the computer. It interested, caught my ear. It was the first musical thing that I've heard in a while that I said, "Well, wait a minute. That's basically R&B chords with with this staccato beat." Okay, that's interesting because if you could break that down and maybe do some interesting effect things, that's one of those songs where it's going to take a lot of studio effects and magic in order to create something, but you don't want to go too overboard because you do always want to try to recreate that if you can with a live band. But still, it's an interesting prospect. um, and so I said that reaching out and doing all those things is one thing that you can do. And I did reach out. I practiced what I preach, guys. But at the end of the day, I was like, I don't know. I don't know. But again, we'll see. You know, I was going through my pedal board and I was looking at this. You guys are familiar with it. This is my Klon Centaur copy that I've had now for a decade, somewhere maybe getting close to a decade now, and a very excellent note for note, with the exception of doesn't have the original those rare diodes, and I'm going to talk about that tonight. But it does have all top of the line circuitry in it that duplicates Bill Finnegan's original Klon Centaur, and I have put this overdrive pedal up against every major overdrive that was equivalent to it or not, and including an original blues breaker. If you guys can think back to my earlier videos where I had a blues breaker, original one, on my board, I had both of these on my blues breaker and this Centaur copy, this clone copy. And at the time I found it funny that I didn't know it, but I was looking at an article and I saw that John Mayer also had a blues breaker pedal and a real Klon Centaur on his original Klon Centaur on his pedal board, and eventually he got rid of the blues breaker and kept the Klon, and I got rid of my blues breaker and kept the Klon. And I want to talk about why that is tonight, because there's a lot. I bring up the blues breaker because I think in the Klon as examples of where truth meets fiction in the pedal market. I haven't dug into the pedal market too much. I've actually been very kind to them in a lot of ways in my critiques. But tonight is going to be a little bit harsh in the sense that, again, there is an oversaturation that's occurring in that market of, even in some cases, duplicate circuits. It's the same circuit in just a different package. And I think maybe a discussion about why you want to try to avoid the overdrive trap is a good one to talk about tonight. So I thought that I would start with that. Um, so tonight we are talking about, the overdrive pedal. And it's funny to me as I look through my notes here that, you'll see on Reddit somebody will say, "Hey, I just got, the such and such overdrive. And and this is the last one. This is it for me. I'm done. This is the holy grail. I'm sold on it, yada yada yada." And till the next one shows up. And I want to talk about that tonight too, the psychology behind why that happens. And I've owned my share of overdrives, real original blues breaker, uh, had a King of Tone on loan, the Thomas. I have quite a few clones like this one, this Tone City pedal, the Little Heat, which is rare as as hen's teeth these days, but it is a fantastic overdrive. And thank you. I keep saying thank you every time. You know who it was who sent it to me. God bless it. It stays as a permanent fixture on my pedal board. But I've had quite a few, and I myself, as soon as I would get a new one, I'd say, "Oh, this is it. This is the one. This is the one. This is it." Until about 2 weeks later, when generally, you know, something else caught my ear or eye. Back when I was churning through pedals, and not really talking about overdrives per se tonight, by the way. We're really talking about why guitarists, and myself included, keep chasing the same sound through a different box. So there's that. One bourbon, one scotch, one beer, or I mean, one overdrive, one fuzz, and one distortion. Well, I understand if you drink one bourbon, one scotch, one beer in a succession, it will lead to distortion, at least visual distortion. So there is a tie in there. I see where you're coming at. Scott says, Mike, do you have any idea of why famous players would want to be uncredited or unnamed in some works they do? Seems to happen a lot when a band member does a kind of thing with another act. Well, to be frank with you, this project with this guy, I was thinking around the same thing. It's like, I'm going to do this track, but I'm just going to give it to him because when I'm done, because there's no percentage in it. There's no money in publishing something like that. There's no chance of it getting any kind of significant distribution or airplay unless you know somebody, and I mean know somebody, and I just don't think so. And there's no amount of money that you could throw at that to make that any different, you know. And so that comes, but it's like Prince when he played on Stand Back. So if you listen to Stand Back, that song, that's all the keyboard work on that is done by Prince. Stevie Nicks said he walked in the studio one day, didn't say a word, just walked up to the computer, to the Oberheim, and started playing the track, and then walked out. And I think people do that because artists do that on that caliber because they really want to sometimes reach out and just do a good thing. Sometimes they don't want to have their name on it for legal reasons. Sometimes they're asked to put it together because somebody else needs it in order to do something felonious. So there's a lot of different, especially back in the 70s and 80s. Lionel Richie talks about that. He kind of hinted at it in a recent interview. So a lot of reasons behind that, actually. Where are you from? Right here, from. I'm not. I'm not gonna say where I'm from because I'm not from there anymore. But I know where I'm at. I'm sitting here at the Upstairs to Ride Music Studio in Amsterdam. You guys are all welcome, and thank you for showing up to the live streams. Good to have everybody here. You look trustworthy, like a humble reporter born in the '70s, like Clark Kent. He's a humble reporter. I seem to recall this current movie at his age. That would put him born somewhere in the '70s. late 70s. That's a good compliment. I'll take that. Thank you. Yeah, why do we do that? What is that about? And let's start with the buzzwords. Transparent overdrive. I sat there and watched a Red Shaw video where he was talking about, well, this one's a little bit more transparent than this one, and it's abused, you know, a lot, that term. And the Klon was considered to be the premier transparent overdrive. The idea was really, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, a few definitions. A transparent overdrive is supposed to give you gain without changing your amp's natural tone, is basically the thought behind that. With no mid hump, no colorization in it, just like a clean boost. Kind of like what this Noble's preamp booster does. It also gives a little bit of a hump, you know, but a boost without really coloring it or changing the mids. And that is what's considered to be a transparent overdrive, um, just at the edge of breakup. But the truth is that the moment you push your amp, everything changes. Understanding the EQ curve. And there's always going to be EQ shaping going on, even subtly, when you start pushing your amp. And the word transparent actually is just marketing poetry, if you want to be kind and call it that. It you know, it it's really funny. You know, the original blues breaker pedal that I had, you know, which then became the king of tone. It was never really truly transparent. It kicked in, and by the way, another one of the big problems and why I got rid of mine is the same problem that all those blues breaker pedals has the low output. It has the is it literally you have to have a you got to have a booster in front of that blues breaker in order just to give it some volume. It really had a low output, and it was kind of it had a low end roll off that when you turn that tone in the section, it was actually just rolling off some of the low end and compression, and it felt transparent at the time if you compared it to something like a tube screamer or an ODR1, but it really was just dicking around with the EQ curve, which you could do honestly with a good amp, a guitar, and an EQ box, an EQ pedal. Um, like a tube screamer cuts the mids, but it adds a bite to it, for example. So that's a little bit of a different thing. So transparency isn't just about um, what the pedal does, it's really how it adds or subtracts to your EQ curve. And so therefore, one overdrive pedal will do just as well as the other if you can m- at least make some changes to it in terms of treble or gain, or maybe a little bit more like the Tone City, you can make a few other adjustments to it as well. But still, the thing that always bothers me is that the pedal makers never explain that X pedal was created with Fender or Marshall for testing. Yeah, and that's an interesting point you bring up there, musical companion, because the Tone City Sweet Tea is based off of a kind of a Fender circuit, just like my old '90s Nobles preamp booster pedal is based off a Fender circuit. And as you know, my ultimate sound that I like is a Fender amp pushed with a guitar and humbuckers. So Yeah. So when I was putting the pedal board together, I had to think along those lines that one will complement the other because, and it's all within a general tone. And at the end, the output for the that I'm using on the cab on the what is this thing? The tone. I'm sorry, the Sonic Cake is a Fender cab. So that's a very good point. Very good point. There are some pedals sound better with certain amps and with certain pickups. Yes, indeed. As an example, analytical two pickups sound good with or tame high mid range amps like JCM 900s, and a tube screener sounds better with single coils. Indeed. So and again, that's now we're diving down the rabbit hole, aren't we? Aren't we? You know. There's certainly no one that's going to fit everybody's taste, but we can all generally agree that the first starting place is where you're going sonically, which is where we should always be asking. Hey everyone, slept in here, but but here now. Hey Maddie, sleeping in is a good thing. I remember there used to be a day when I could sleep in, but I can't do it anymore. I swear, if I go to bed at 5:59, I'll be up at 6 sharp. It's terrible. But there's that. Let's be honest, it's not really about tone, it's about hope. When you buy an overdrive, you believe it's finally going to give you that record tone that's in your head. And the moment you plug it in and sound like yourself, but better, you're sold um, for about 3 days. And then your ears adjust, the dopamine fades, and you're back online looking for the next hit of dopamine, the next sonic dopamine hit. And it's a little insidious in the fact that we do it because one of the few affordable ways to feel like we're kind of progressing as musicians is the amount of equipment that we're taking in. So a $120 pedal feels like a reasonable upgrade compared to buying an amp or some of the more pricier models, but then it starts to add up, doesn't it? The pedal industry knows this. They're aware of this. They built a marketing machine based on insecurities and low price, well, relatively low price dopamine hits. They got into trouble when the prices on pedals started getting out of control because even the sound junkies were like, wait a minute, why am I paying $800-900 for this this whatever. Strymon comes to mind. And that kind of got the pedal industry in a little bit of trouble. Um, but primarily, they're there to sell you identity, not sound. And it's up to you, as we were just discussing here, about knowing where you're going first sonically and understanding the sonic, the overall tone of a certain pedal, what tone is going to be delivered from that, and what works well with that. Of course, that's something that you'll learn over time and is subjective to your own personal taste. But we just had two guys talking here, and we both agree on those same. Some things are just universally true. Some single coils guitars sound better with certain amps. Certain amps sound better with humbuckers. Certain pedals as well. As well. Um, what pedal is that? Gosh, there was a pedal that I had that I absolutely loved with single coil of my Telecaster. But when I plugged in my Les Paul, it just didn't work, and that one went because again the other thing I'm looking for is a pedal board that I can put any pedal in, any guitar, whether it's single or humbucker or P90s, and still achieve a good tone. And so if you've ever watched a pedal demo when someone says use the original clipping diodes from 1979, uh, I would turn that off. You know, the marketing and the myth of the magical diode. Boy, has any pedal had more myth to it than the circuitry that went inside the original clock. You know, well, they just don't make those. You know, I bought the last batch of those diodes. You know, uh, and doggone it, that was it. They don't make them anymore because the factory burned down, and then a quicksand opened up underneath that, and then a star fell on top of that. So it's gone. And it's a funny thing, it's like vintage wine marketing. I thought about, in a way, the idea that one specific batch of components from 40 years ago can change your tone. Again, I took this to get serviced, my clone copy, to my old pedal guy who he's retired now, and I can't. He won't even answer my emails anymore. So he's gone. Speak talking about gone. But what he worked on is one of the last things he worked on. And he said, "This is excellent." He said, "I work on a lot of clone, original, and copies. This is an excellent one. Where did you get it?" And I told him the story. There's no magic diodes in it. The guys couldn't get those original magic diodes that Bill had originally. But still, it delivers that it's a great sounding clone copy. So come on. And I had a rat too. I started going. Remember, I had that rat pedal, and I was debating that. And if you had an early rat, they tell you uh, that those were good because they had that vintage silicon um, diode working in it. So they're only the good rat. The only good rats are the early ones, and the new ones don't sound like the old ones. And we've all heard these kind of things. You see where I'm going with this? I'm going with again the mythology and the BS talk. I could have a sleep in and a nap every day. Oh, I wish. I wish. Remember when DoD was affordable option to Boss? Yeah, and Voodoo Labs. Now it's like you can barely get a name brand pedal for $100. Yep, chips and pedals. There's a market there for the chips and pedal. I have to admit, I might even have to break my. I mean, in a way, I guess this is a chipson, but it's made. This was made in the States too. This is not made in China. This was made in the States, in LA, actually, from these guys. But who knew what they were doing? But yeah, it's just ridiculous. And again, they got into a lot of trouble with their pricing recently and those increases. Again, it's a dopamine hit that seemed okay when it was $50 a pedal, six heck, $100 a pedal, okay, but it's gotten a little ridiculous. And so the rat thing, I heard that so much. Oh man, that's cool, but it's not the original rat. Those are the best sounding ones. The ones out there are no good. And I've heard a lot of rat pedals, and a rat pedal is a rat pedal is a rat pedal. Believe me, believe me. What still blows my mind is how different better guitar sounds when there's a drum track. A drum track can make even my playing coherent. It's the over. It's just again a part of the overall melange of flavors that you get that is seasoning. Music die Dennis Hinshaw, I call BS. A rat is a rat. Yeah, exactly. A rat is a rat is a rat. Like Jimmy Cagney, hey you rat. Um but magic diodes, yeah, and you hear that. You hear that a lot. And that is also one of the reasons why the original Klon pedals are, the price that they are because, Ben had magic pixie dust as well that they gave. You buy 3 magic diodes and you get a free pack of pixie dust. So he was able to sprinkle, not on everyone. Every other one got the pixie dust, and that drove up the price. But I can tell you, that this is. I always talk about 95% of the way there in the ballpark. This is 100% in the ballpark. I mean, okay, it's not original, so I'll be fair, and it's 99% of the way in the ballpark of original Klon. And it doesn't have the magical dye. It's got good dye. It's got to have good crap. Can have cheap stuff in it. But they're all. It's funny. Michael Watson. I've never used an overdrive. I let my Marshall and Fender amps drive themselves. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Sometimes use a rat pedal with distortion, dial back in the volume up. That's how I use the rat pedal myself. Matter of fact, that was the only way that I found it usable for what I wanted to do. You know, most Mojo parts are just the cheapest available at the time of manufacture. I'm just gonna be right. And then magically 30 years later, oh, that was the shit, It's nostalgia wrapped in technical language. And you always have to be careful of that. That's a trap. Remember we talked about traps? Um, I brought in my cup, but I forgot to put anything in it. I'm sitting here with an empty, meant to fill it up with water. Somehow or another, that didn't happen. I must be tired. I am today. It was a long day. What actually matters is the circuit topology, the voltage headroom, and your amp pairing. Everything else is storytelling. Everything else is storytelling. Again, I find that funny. It's like with the guitar, some of the components that are now, they don't make those anymore. It's got the magic magnets or this. The reason why Gibson was switching up the magnets in those humbuckers that they were producing out of the box is because they were sourcing the cheapest stuff that they could get. That's why some of those guitars have Anarco 2 magnets. Some of them have 3, some of them have 5. You know, and they're all over the place because they were sourcing it from wherever. But no, now it's $3,000 per pickup if you want to get an original 58, 59, or 60 humbucker. You're not chasing tone anymore. You're really chasing belief systems at that point. I'm just saying. The psychology of tone chasing is basically is what I'm trying to drive at tonight. I hesitate to use the word best, but the Dan Electro Daddy is pretty badass. And they're not collectibles. Yeah, that Dan Electro. Oh my gosh, what was that Dan Electro had? It was really simple. It had 5 selections on it you could choose. Gosh, what was that one? I can't think of it, but it was an excellent one that I would have kept. Uh, Again, but it was there was only one on it that I liked, which I really liked. One of the selections on that, gosh, I can't think of it right now, but it was kind of a one-trick pony, but it was a good one. The one thing that it did it really well. Dan Electro makes decent stuff. The only reason I have certain pedals like the Rat is producers used to request them. Yeah, I understand that. Same thing, of course. Producers love things like that back in there. Yeah, I agree. If you're running a studio, you got people coming in, you have to have all those things because you have to serve your clients. Um, and so that's complete, including guitars. That's a tough thing to run a studio, because the best studios, even the best studios, had to use rental services in the states because they just didn't have everything there that the artist might particularly want. One of my jobs when I was as a second engineer working for Babyface, again, I told you guys, was running equipment to different studios. They'll take this move down to X, Y, and Z studio because X, Y, and Z wants to use it, or And so it's a tough thing. I always admire that, to be honest with you, to be able to do that. In a personal home studio, it's quite the opposite. It's a different mentality. Buying gear gives you a dopamine hit. It does. It really does. Oh, I'm excited. This new piece is gonna make me. This new thing is coming in, and I'm excited. But I find that the novelty often runs out faster than the improvement sets in. Let that one sink in for a minute. And we think tone improvement will make us play better, but the reality is playing better makes everything sound better. So I was that guy today when I picked up the guitar and he said, and tuned it up and I played a little bit. And he was like, you said you haven't played in a while. I was like, yeah. And then he says, oh, I play guitar, and but you sound like you just were playing this morning. And I'm like, well, yeah, playing better. I'm a better guitar player, so of course it's going to sound better. Some guy could walk in here and be a better guitar player than me and make it even sound even better. So again, playing better makes everything sound better. That's a good place to start. Some of my best tones came from setups on paper that were completely wrong. You know, a cheap pedal into an even cheaper amp, and and like my 606, my going into, God, what amp was that? I think it was a PV. And I recorded one of the best guitar solos on my song "The Sower" that I've ever recorded. It's still a beauty. It still sounds good, and that's a good guitar. It was a good guitar, but a cheap pedal going into a cheap amp recorded with good microphones. So there is that. But it worked. You got to know where to spend money in that chain, where the money should be spent. I guess is another takeaway from that. So when we talk about overdrives, we're really talking about is creativity versus consumption. I have two overdrives on my pedal board that are there to stay. I love this Sweet Tea from Tone City, and I'm sorry, this not Sweet Tea. I keep calling it Sweet Tea, but it is the Heat, the Little Heat. Sorry, it's based on the Sweet Tea circuit. It's Little Heat is one. It's teeny tiny little thing. Don't want to take it because it's on pretty good, but it plugged in. But it it is an excellent little itty bitty overdrive. And when I want to, get a little bit of some different, the Klon steps in, and I never run them together. I don't stack them. I never did that. But two, and I'm happy. I'm good. I really don't feel the need for another overdrive. You know, we get bored with pedals fast because the novelty wears off of them. I had that. Some of them you've seen me excited about something, and then it kind of fades off, and I'm like, it's gone. I've done that with a few guitars. We think tone improvement will make us play better, but again, playing better makes you sound better. And sometimes what actually matters is learn how to use the stuff that you got in conjunction with playing better. Even hell, stack your pedals differently. Throw the rule book out, and if you really want to do something, you don't want to spend any money, take what you have and rearrange it, play around with it, explore with it. And exploring and rearranging and playing with what you have, you may unlock something that you weren't aware of, or learn how something works a little bit better that you weren't aware of. It happens to me all the time. Even with one, two, three, four, five pedals, I'm rearranging, I'm stacking, I'm trying to figure out where the best arrange is. It's actually six because there's a wall that I use, but you get the idea. Tone is like coffee. Once you know how to brew it, you can make it work with just about everything, including cheap beans. So, what does that say? Is it the equipment or is it you? Is the equipment? Is it you? I'm gonna get myself one more overdrive. It was, it was an overdrive demo on YouTube that inspired this discussion tonight because it was for the new JCM 900 pedal, and I'm thinking, my gosh, but it sounds better. The guy said on the demo, he says this sounds better than the amp does. Okay, interesting. But that'll get you too. Well, I don't have either, but it sounds cheaper to get the. It sounds to me that if I want to experience that, then it's cheaper for me to get the pedal than the amp. Gotcha, right? Especially if the price on the pedal is not too outrageous, then again, that's a trap. I'm good because sometimes you don't need more. You just need to understand what you got. I've said that a dozen times. You know, record yourself too helps if you can. Record yourself and hear your tone, and because it's a good way you can sit back, speaking coffee, you can listen to the recordings of yourself, listen back, and you can, excuse me, critique yourself. Said it was a long day, guys. I very rarely yawn, but forgive me that. But yeah, just dig that. You know, probably buy another overdrive next week. But at least now you know why. You know the psychology why you do that, and maybe you'll pause when you get ready to push. Buy. Maybe you'll pause and say, "Hey, wait a minute, don't I already have something that I could work with that could make this work?" And I haven't even got into plugins because we're talking about analog, physical, hold it in your hand type of pedals. Most people today are really just throwing this out of the box altogether and just using plug-in versions of pedals. That's a whole nother thing. But for those of us who still, hold on to the the actual physical pedals, something to think about. Just something to think about. Catch up here in the chat. Mike, what do you think of Yanni? I know that, but I'm so gosh dong tired. What is your refresh my memory on that, Scott, if you don't mind? Sounds super familiar to me, but I'm kind of dragging ass now. Mike, what's your go-to overdrive? Mine is OCD by Fulton. My go-to overdrive is this Klon copy that I got, and this Little Heat from Tone City. Those are it. And this is going after going through, and I exaggerate not, at least a dozen or more overdrive pedals over time of all different tube screamers, rats, you know, a few J Archer pedals, quite a few. I have a Joyo American Fender amp. The Joyo, that's good. That's actually good. It's the second best Fender sound I have at $40. The Joyo California sound is the best Mesa Boogie 2, you're going to get sound for $20. My opinion. My favorite is the Joyo American sound. I keep buying them and I keep giving them away. And the last one I gave to my brother, and I haven't bought another one. But speaking of good overdrive pedals that I wouldn't have as a permanent fixture on my board, what would happen is I would take the Klon off my board and I'd put the Joyo in its place, just for something that I was doing. So that would be the Joyo California sound. Here I go. It would be, honestly, it's a cheap one, and you can get them pretty easily. I'm surprised that I haven't bought it. Would be the next overdrive on my list, and it's not an expensive one, but it's a good one. I guess he's like Kenny G with a piano. Yeah, okay, yeah. All right, I know who that is. Well, yeah, I'm vaguely familiar, flipping through. Hey, I haven't really dug it, but I kind of like piano music, so unless it's just completely elevator, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's fine. Yep, it sounds good too. Long hair, mustache. Sounds like my art teacher from junior high school. When I hear people say California sound, everything Beach Boys and Metallica, Fender Cleaner, or Mesa Boogie. Yeah, yeah, California sound. So they named it correctly. I kid you not, for 20, 30 bucks, you guys are not going to get a better pedal. And by the way, that thing operates, I do believe, as its own, you don't need any kind of, because it has a built-in cabinet simulator in it, you can use it just on its own. And, if you have a guitar, set of headphones, you plug your guitar into the input of the Joyo California Sound headphones into the output, and you're good to go. Yeah, it's such a good sounding. I've had a few, none of them sounded bad. Versatile sounding, and even the Harley Benton version, which is made by the same factory as Joyo, they sound the same. Don't get into that. Well, the Joyos sound better than the Harley Benton ones. It's the same freaking circuit and the same chassis, made in the same freaking factory. It's just got a different label on it. Again, you know, the magic diode. I just, I'm amazed. I'm amazed. I'm amazed. That's the one and only cheap pedal, quote unquote cheap pedal, that I could highly recommend to anybody. So there's that. So to sum it up, you know, just really, concentrate on your tone. I keep getting back to that. I keep hitting this same idea in, different angles in these live stream discussions. Even again, the regular content discussions. Just to get to drive this concept home, that it's really, the tone is really in your playing, your fingers. And I heard Stevie Ray Vaughan play, Voodoo Child on three different strats that you can see on YouTube. Three different, this one, that, three different ones, and one of them had a rosewood fretboard on it. I noticed there was no different in tone from when he played Voodoo Child on the Strat that had the rosewood fretboard or the one that had a maple fretboard. There was no difference between one was a vintage one and one was more contemporary to his time. It looked like a just off the, 80s, 90s, early 90s Strat from the period he was alive. And the tone was still 100% pure Stevie Ray Vaughan. End of story. So you should be able to look at something like that and draw that conclusion. Say, maybe if I work on my tone, then no matter what I play it on, it'll sound good. Just a thought. again, again today, I was playing that nylon, which is not a guitar that I like, but I sounded like me when I played it. I know that's Mike McWilliams playing that guitar, and that really is what it came down to. It didn't matter. I was like, well, I don't like playing these because the strings always feel slippery to me. I know that sounds weird, but I don't like the texture of nylon. To me, is a little weird. But just something to think about, guys. Just something to think about. All right. I think I got through a whole hour. Wow. I am super duper duper impressed. I have something in mind to film tomorrow that I will be releasing either tomorrow or on Friday. Probably tomorrow, Friday for sure, for my regular content. Um, I was going through my mic box today and looking at my microphones, and I'm interested in the comparison thing, so I might do that coming up here. But either way, I am quite pleased to be here and be able to continue to come up with interesting ideas and stuff that you guys find interesting. Conversations I hope that stimulate you to think a little deeper. And as always, guys, I appreciate you spending your time with me. I'm a little burnt out tonight, so I'll call it a little earlier today, just a few minutes, 50, 55, 5 minutes early. I'll call it 5 minutes early tonight. Drink my hot cocoa and go to bed. It's cold tonight, guys. It's actually freezing in here. That's why I got my hat on just to warm. I don't want to turn the heater on yet. It's not hot enough to turn on it. It's not cold enough to turn on the heater, but it's not warm enough where I can walk around in my briefs. So the weather is changing. I'm actually even going to go in here and have some hot cocoa and go to bed. So you guys take care. Love you guys. Be good. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.